Oopsie. I only got 50% of what I wanted to get and play. Severed head. That'll be fun, I'm sure. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to my channel. Welcome to my live stream. If you're new to my live stream, this is as exciting as it gets. Put something on the TV to watch or listen to, I guess, while I do some work on some of these guys. You're welcome to hang around, see what's up, or keep me on in the background. It's just background noise, maybe while you get some stuff done around the house before going to bed tonight. Or you can check in every, 30, 40 minutes to see if I've managed to cut my hand off yet. Or something fun, But yeah. Oh my god! There we go. That's a bit more interesting. But anyway, yeah. Thanks for stopping by, and yes, we'll watch some stuff. I got a headache.
Speaking of water, I don't know if you noticed, but society has become quite infatuated with drinking water as a back in my day, you had a Capri Sun for lunch, a few sips of metallic water from the drinking fountain, and maybe, if you were lucky, you could drink out of the garden hose. That was your hydration for the day. But in the past few years, water has gone from a boring drink to something you can't leave home without. You got Stanley, who made water bottles fashionable, air-up pods in case your water's too bland, and everyone and their grandmother telling you, nay, ordering you to drink more water. At this point, it feels like drinking water has become more than just a basic necessity for living. It's kind of cultish. And I'm not talking about Liquid Death or Diet Coke kind of cult either. But I'd be lying if I didn't admit I was definitely a card-carrying member of the can't leave my house without my wallet club. Case in point, one evening I was planning on taking Claudia out for dinner here in Miami. Good husband stuff, because I'm a frickin' legend. But before we could go, both of us had to, were compelled to, make sure we had refilled our water bottles before we left the house. That's right, we both made sure we had 40 ounces of water on us each before we went to the restaurant. That serves water. It was at this point that I started to realize maybe I had let my desire to stay hydrated get a bit out of hand. But water is good for us, right? So this society-wide shift towards drinking more water must also be good, right? But what if we perhaps swung the pendulum too far the other way? Are we drinking too much water? I mean, how much water does a person actually need in a day? Well, like a tall glass of water, today I aim to get to the bottom of all the thirst-quenching questions. So pour yourself a cold one, loyal theorists, and fill it up to the brim with knowledge, as we find out whether these emotional support water bottles are causing us to overhydrate. Let's start by wetting our whistles and asking ourselves, why is water so gosh darn special? I mean, as far as we know, water is not only critical for human life, but it's a prerequisite for life as we know it to exist. While the average person can, in extreme circumstances, go on for a few months without eating, that same person went just 3 days without water, they'd be cooked. And almost literally. But why? Well, you see, it all comes down to
thank you for the love.
Water has some pretty unique chemical properties that water is what's known as meaning that it's good at dissolving other substances.
I'm not okay.
Better than any other liquid in the universe, actually. This makes water the perfect medium to dissolve all of the waste products our body produces, so that we can release them from our body in the form of urine. Not only that, but
why have people chosen Taos as Canada's #1 German?
I'm okay. I'm okay.
Now the new 2025.
I'm just allergic to life. Hello. Hello, Brenda.
But nearly every chemical reaction your body needs to do to keep you upright basically needs to happen in water. No water means no reactions, means no living. Water is also a great lubricant. Grow up, guys, come on. It not only softens and cushions the spaces between our joints and vertebrae, but also keeps our vital organs like the brain protected too. Water is even used to help regulate
fuck me.
You see, water is really good at holding onto heat. Therefore, when our bodies get too hot, that heat can be funneled into outside of the body in the form of sweat, thus cooling us off. But water doesn't just make it so we can survive, but thrive as well. Proper hydration has been linked to many a benefit that, while not critical for survival, ends up being the real-life version of aesthetic. Tons of experiments, for example, have shown a strong correlation between proper hydration and brain
I should put something in
function.
the... Oh my god!
Hydration, sometimes as little as 3 percentage points can negatively affect memory, concentration, and even lead to increased feelings of anxiety. We talked about this a bit in a game theory we did a few months ago if you want to know more. But it's tough. I understand if you don't want to. Proper hydration has also been shown to help stave off headaches, maximize your athletic performance, and even keep your poop chugging along. And the thing that keeps my sleep chugging along? Today's sponsor, Helix Sleep. Listen, I had my old mattress for 8 years, but it was just, it's time. I was waking up with back pain. Claudia was waking up with back pain. I was waking up with back pain. I know I said me twice, but I was waking up with a lot of back pain, alright? And shopping for mattresses is never fun. You have to go to so many stores because you keep getting kicked out for jumping on every mattress and bringing your own bowling ball and wine glass to recreate those old commercials. But then I heard about Helix Sleep, and let me tell you, it is the greatest thing I've ever slept on. And I've literally slept on a bed of marshmallows, which, not that great, but I digress. The Helix Sleep Quiz helps you find the
I think the marshmallows would be
mattress for
sticky.
you. Personally, I'm a side sleeper and tend to run a bit hot, and Claudia sleeps on her stomach trying to smother herself every night while burning hotter than a neutron ball. So I just put that information in, and biggity bam, we get recommended the Midnight Lux mattress. This thing is amazing, okay? It's made me late for meetings because I can't say goodbye to it in the morning. I wrote and am literally recording this in bed. Best part is, no more back pain or shoulder creaking when I wake up. And even though the dying sun I call my wife still runs hot, it doesn't bother me anymore because I'm nice and cool over on the inside. Trust me,
Alright.
it's time to say goodbye to your dingy old mattress and try out Helix Sleep for yourself. And if you use my link in the description below, you get 27% off site-wide and a free bedding bundle with any Lux or Elite mattress order. Thank you again to Helix Sleep for sponsoring today's episode. Now let's dive back in. Alright, so the importance of staying hydrated is as clear as, well, water. That was too easy. I know, I'll be better. So why don't we just constantly chug down gallons of water to keep our brains sharp and our joints from rickety crackling? Well, as it turns out, it is true that too much of a good thing can be bad. You see, your body can only handle so much new water at one time. For example, your kidneys, the organ responsible for filtering your blood and maintaining your body's fluid levels, can only handle around 1 liter or about a quarter gallon of fluid per hour. If you end up drinking much more than that, well, that water has to go somewhere, and that somewhere is into your cells. The reason why this happens is a bit complicated, but to put it simply, when you drink too much water, your body has too much water and too few electrolytes. You know, those minerals like sodium
Okay,
and potassium.
how am I gonna do
found in
you?
sports drinks, with Gatorade and Powerade being the prime example.
I'll give you another coat of blue
But
if
due
you
to
want
this
to do.
imbalance of water and electrolytes, the excess water starts flooding into your cells and causes them to swell. And for those of you thinking, oh, sick, drinking too much water makes me swole? Noise! No, not noise. While swollen calves and biceps might sound dope, you know what doesn't sound dope? A swollen brain. All of that water also flows into your brain cells as well. Being trapped inside the thick skull, the swollen brain has nowhere to expand, and the increased pressure on your cranium starts to cause the early warning signs of water intoxication, including headaches, drowsiness, and confusion. And unfortunately, in some rare cases, people have died from too much water consumption. In 1995, a British teen died after reportedly drinking 1.8 gallons, or about 7 liters of water in a 90-minute period. In 2007, a woman in the US died after participating in a radio station contest that saw her drink nearly 2 gallons without going to the bathroom. And in probably the most heartbreaking example, an 11-year-old boy died in 2020 after he was allegedly forced to drink just 3/4 of a gallon of water in a 4-hour period by his parents. I bring those stories up not because they're sad, but to show that too much water is a very real thing. And the amounts of water we're talking about are high, but not unfathomably high. Don't get me wrong, you have to intentionally go out of your way to drink these quantities of water. 1.8 gallons, the amount of water that killed that teen in the UK, that's the equivalent of about 6 40-ounce Stanley Cups that she drank in 90 minutes. For the average person, that's not even remotely feasible to do by accident. But that's an average person.
I had to
There is a
drink,
group of people out there who,
2
by
liters of
nature
water
what they do are
before my
surprisingly
CT scan.
very susceptible to accidentally
I was well hydrated.
and that's
Like, I like drinking water, but that put me off water for like 3
constantly
months.
losing water in the form of sweat while running. It may seem odd that they drink too much water, but as it turns out, it's the fact that they're sweating that's the problem. Have you ever tasted sweat before? First off, gross. Second of all, you'll know that sweat is just like most of the League of Legends population. Incredibly salty. That means when marathon runners are sweating, they're not only losing water, but they're losing electrolytes too. Therefore, if they then choose to rehydrate themselves by drinking pure water, water, they'll be in the same scenario we warned about earlier. Too much water, not enough electrolytes, swollen cells, and bad news. Circling back to the topic at hand, at this point, we know what happens to your body when you don't drink enough water and what happens when you drink too much water, both of which are no bueno. So the big question is, how much water should we drink? That turns out to be a pretty complicated question. The old adage that I and probably many of you heard growing up was that we were supposed to be drinking 8 8-ounce glasses of water a day. But where does that come from? And is it even accurate? After doing a little bit of digging, the consensus seems to be that the origin of this 8x8 rule is a paper put out by the U.S. National Research Council and Food and Nutrition Board back in 1945. They said,
a suitable allowance of water for adults is usually 2.5 liters daily.
2.5 liters comes out to roughly 84.5 fluid ounces, which is way more than the 8 8-ounce glasses would get you. I don't know, man. This feels like one of those origin stories that doesn't really make much sense. But regardless of where it came from, the rule has definitely hung around, being one of the top answers people find when trying to figure out how much water they should drink. But is that enough? Is it too much? Well, let's look at this from a pure biological perspective. Every day, we're losing water from our sweat, our breath, our pee, and yeah, even our poop. On average, a person loses about 2.5 to 3 liters of water per day. So an estimate that we need to drink about 2.5 liters to make up that difference makes sense. Still, that estimate of 2.5 liters does come from, the end of World War II. So let's look at some more modern water intake recommendations. In 2005, what is now known as the National Academy of Medicine put out their own guidelines that suggest males between 19 and 30 years old should consume about 3.7 liters of water per day, and females 2.7 liters. And that may sound like a lot, but there's fine print. That's the amount of total water consumption. As it turns out, not all of the water we consume during the day actually comes from drinking. Around 20% of your daily water intake, surprisingly, comes from the food you eat, not your beverages. When factoring that into consideration, the National Academy of Medicine says young adults should be drinking between 2.2 and 3 liters per day. Not only does that line up with the 1945 number, but also roughly with what the European Food Safety Authority also recommended in 2010. But then again, every source I looked into for this said that even those estimates are just that, estimates. Things like age, climate, sex, diet, and activity level all play a role in determining how much water an individual person might need to drink. And many of those factors can change from day to day. So we're no closer. And I guess that's the thing, right? Drinking water doesn't make you healthy. Actually, nothing does. When you really think about it, you don't become healthy. You make healthy choices. If you drink copious amounts of soda or Red Bull every day and you replace that with glasses of water, that's a healthy choice. The fact of the matter is, there's no magic formula or rule of thumb that I or anyone can give you to know how much water you need to drink day. There's just too many factors that make your body unique. However, you know who does know your body the best? Your body. You see, our fleshy meat sacks are super good at giving us the signs we need to know whether we're staying at the right level of hydration. One way to know it's time to drink water? Water. And I know it sounds cliche, but whenever you're thirsty, our bodies have evolved for millions of years to give us the signs. All we gotta do is read them. But if you're trying to figure out whether you're getting enough water at poodle, look no further than your pee. I'm serious. The color of your urine can actually give you a pretty handy guide as to whether you're properly hydrated. If it's as yellow as the Food Theory logo, then maybe you should be trying to fit in a few more glasses a day. On the other hand, if your pee looks like water, you might be having too much of the stuff. The ideal you're looking for in your pee is a nice pale yellow. If you're getting that on a consistent basis, then you're doing fine. And I think that's the biggest thing you should take away from this episode. You're probably doing fine. While I was researching for this, I ended up stumbling across this old clip from Bellingham YouTube extraordinaire Dr. Mike that I think perfectly encapsulates how you should treat your water intake.
I like when patients take initiative and put a focused effort to make sure that they're well hydrated. But when you cross that line and it becomes something that causes anxiety in your mind, that could actually do more harm than good.
And if you think you're too emotionally attached to your bottle, don't. Carrying around your bottle, whether it's a small one or a 10-gallon jug, a Stanley, or an Awala, is not making you form dependency. If anything, it is encouraging healthier behaviors in you. The fringe cases of water intoxication and overhydration are not going to shoot up in number because of fashionable bottles. But at the same time, if you find yourself forcing down those last chugs of water just because you want to make it to the bottom of your motivational jug, that's when you get yourself into more dangerous territory. At the end of the day, you need to listen to your body, not some adage from 1945, and definitely not some plastic bottle that, honestly, is a bit presumptuous about my daily schedule. So whether you're someone that knows they probably should drink more water but hasn't taken the steps yet, or you're someone like me who feels a bit naked whenever he leaves the house without his Awala, rest assured, we're all still learning. And it's about making healthy choices, not magically becoming healthy. And to that I say, bottoms up. But hey, that's just a theory. A food theory. Buen provecho. And if you're still thirsty for more water content, click the card on screen to see how one company turned the dumb idea of selling water in a can into a $1 billion hydration empire. And as always, I'll see you next week.
This is everything you need to know about the Book of Bill. With the new year upon us, the ARG still ongoing, and Gravity Falls clearly ramping up for something new, I wanted to take all of our speculation, theorizing, ARG solving, everything we've done for the Book of Bill so far, and put it in one place for your convenience. And of course, I couldn't resist also tossing in a couple of new mini theories too, but you'll have to watch them to see for yourself. And real quick, big shout outs to the Gravity Falls subreddit and Discord, as well as the other awesome theorists here on YouTube that all worked their butts off decoding the Book of Bill and this ARG. Y'all crushed it, and we couldn't have done this without you.
Hello, Internet. This time, you're on your own.
Actually, no. No, you're not. Hello, Internet. Welcome to Film Theory, where that some sunny day is finally here. Yeah, you know what that means. The one-eyed triangular 2D demon Bill Cipher has returned to wreak havoc on the world of Gravity Falls. Well, sort of. If you don't know, Gravity Falls was an animated series on Disney XD created by mystery mastermind and theorist champ Alex Hirsch. The show's about twins Dipper and Mabel Pines, who spent summer vacation with their grunkle Stan in the small town of Gravity Falls, Oregon. Here, they encounter all sorts of mysteries and codes and cryptids, gnomes that kidnap kids, and killer animatronics before they were cool. But most importantly, they help defeat Bill Cipher, a demon from the second dimension with godlike powers who was hell-bent on conquering the world. This show was built from the ground up for theorizing, something Matt pointed out multiple times throughout his theories and why I've been so excited to cover it. Along with FNAF and the MCU, Gravity Falls was one of the shows that really drove an entire generation of theorists. So when Disney announced the Book of Bill, a new addition to the Gravity Falls canon written by Alex Hirsch himself, I couldn't wait to get my grubby little theorist hands on it. Excuse me, the spirit of Grunkle Stan just kind of possessed me there. See, unlike a lot of other shows from the same period like Adventure Time or Steven Universe, there wasn't a lot of Gravity Falls. It got in, told its story in 2 seasons, and then ended. People desperately wanted more of it, which is why people are so hyped for this book. It's promised to show us more of this world and its characters, and let me tell you friends, this thing is dense. We learn so much about this world, about its history and lore, secrets about each of our main characters, and about Bill himself. And that's without cracking any of the mysteries and codes inside. You guys have been asking us to cover this book for
Should start
weeks
working on
at this
things, I
point,
guess.
and believe me,
I was gonna
we've
take some
heard you.
painting.
We've been working on this in the background and wanted to make sure we approached it right. And just to be upfront here, friends, there's a lot here. So much in this book and the surrounding media and ARG that there's no way this won't be at least 2 episodes. So today, for this theory, we're just going to be looking at the contents of the Book of Bill itself and what it tells us about the future of this franchise. But don't you worry, it tells us a lot about the future of Gravity Falls. The main thing? Well, it's spelled out clearly in this book in bold, underlined letters, but Bill Cipher is alive. He survived the events of Weirdmageddon, and that might mean the doom of the entire multiverse. But, well, someone's looking out for us. Shake my hand, friends. It's time to get weird. So, probably the first thing we should mention about the Book of Bill is that it canonically originates within the Gravity Falls universe, like the literal physical book itself. It's a tool that Bill uses to psychically linked with the reader, and it haunted Ford over in Gravity Falls until he got sick of it and threw it into a dimensional rift left behind by Weirdmageddon. It then ended up in our world, where the reader finds it and is offered a deal by Bill Cipher. Also, just want to say, in the lore and story of this world, Alex Hirsch must have found this book first, and that confirms our previous theory during Matt's retirement party that he was possessed by Bill Cipher. The author blurb on the back of the book sleeve reads, "Hi friends, I'm Alex Hirsch, creator of Gravity Town, and I'm definitely not possessed by a demon right now." And on it goes. Alex then assures us that he's definitely fine and is not calling out for help. He thinks the author doth protest too much. Regardless, the book is in our world now, and it's literally infecting other books, while also summoning Bill to broker an agreement with us, let's say. Yeah, he offers us a deal. He'll tell us all about his backstory, but in exchange, we'll owe him a favor somewhere down the road. It's at this point that we're given a choice to say yes or no, and man, I got excited. I thought this was going to be one of those awesome sort of choose-your-own-adventure books, so naturally, as someone aware of Bill's shenanigans, I said no, and flipped to the page it specified, and, well, there was some very small text upside down on the top of the page. It basically told me that not shaking Bill's hand meant that I was going to live out the rest of my life in the most boring way possible. As a middle manager at a mustard factory in Idaho with 4 children, Gervis, Horvin, Borley, and Smunt. Poor Smunt. Unreal. I am absolutely the sort of person that would name like a cat Smunt, and I apologize to my future cat because, well, your name is Smunt. Okay, so it really seems like if we want all of the new juicy lore in this book, we need to agree to Bill's terms. And hey, well, I've sold my soul for less. We agreed to this deal, and whoa! In one of I've ever seen in this sort of product, Bill's way through the book into our reality. It's really slick stuff, and a bit terrifying, and though you might expect to immediately kill us here and move on, nah, he doesn't. He actually keeps up his end of the bargain, and then some. The content of the book becomes super varied, bouncing between sections that look like magazines, Q&As with Bill about the concept of love, a how-to guide on how to get into heaven. It's mysteriously left blank, so immediately you get what Bill thinks about that idea. There are tons of hidden codes that you'll need to decipher if you want the whole story, and even just straight-up excerpts ripped from a book called The Great Gatsby. This was a novel by F. Scott Fitzgerald that everybody had to read in like the 7th grade, which just entered the public domain a couple of years ago, so hey, why not? It's still weird, but why not? But a couple of my favorite
maybe you should do some audiobooks again.
I
did most of them in Halloween a couple of years ago.
Straight out of some analog
Frankenstein,
There's
Dracula.
Slenderman, who lies about people, Guillermo del Torso, who has a passion for cinema and has written a script for National Treasure 4, The Off Model, which is a monster that looks like bootleg IP and would just like legitimately be a good monster for this sort of analog horror. Can we make that? And the Mirror Dimension that contains monsters like Bloody Mary, Dysmorphia, and David Lynch. Yes, as in film director David Lynch. I am losing my gosh dang mind because this is hilarious and exactly the sort of humor just made for me. Then there's a whole section about the concept of morality, which Bill believes is 100% flexible and that karma is a scam. He's immediately hit in the eye by a paper airplane after he says that, so I mean, you be the judge of whether or not he's right. That's funny, but the whole reason that I'm pointing this out is that he gives us, the reader, a moral test here. On this page, he's imprisoned an elf named Scrimbles with bones made of glass. If we turn the page and continue on our journey to learn all about the new lore, we'll crush Scrimbles and he'll die. That's hilariously dark and, well, I mean, sorry Scrimbles, there's lore to uncover. Forgive me. We also get some new lore about the Pines family. There's a whole section dedicated to the missing pages of Journal 3 and Ford's earliest interactions with Bill, and another where Bill talks about the dreams of many of the main characters, including Dipper. He explains that Dipper has a recurring nightmare about overhearing a fight between his parents that he wasn't supposed to hear, before wondering why Dipper and Mabel got sent to Gravity Falls for the summer on such short notice. Yeah, that's pretty dark, implying that this whole series only exists because their marriage was was falling apart, and the parents needed Dipper and Mabel out of the house while they worked out what to do. Ouch, that one hits right in the feels. But okay, that was a lot of the fun, if weird and dark stuff here in the book. What's the real meat and potatoes, though? Where's the real lore? Well, again, true to his word, Bill tells us exactly where he comes from. Bill explains that he's from a world called Euclidia, where no one could comprehend the third dimension, but he was born with a mutation that lets him see into the third dimension. This was apparently cursed and forbidden knowledge. Bill claims that talking about the third dimension was illegal in his world. Despite this, Bill still wanted to share the truth with the rest of his people, but, well, we're not sure what happened, and neither is Bill. He says that he heard a loud buzzing and that he blacked out, and that he still does whenever he thinks about this, but when he came to, no one was alive in his universe except for him. He killed them all. Now, in this very explanation, Bill says that he's not some misunderstood character that can be humanized by a tragic backstory, but I'm not so sure about that. Like, don't get me wrong, Bill is a bad guy, an awful person, and definitely a villain, but I'm not so sure he ended up that way all on his own. At the beginning of this section, we see Bill bursting through a wall behind a TV with a strange symbol on it. Well, this is actually from the cover of a story called Flatland, written by Edwin Abbott. In Flatland, a two-dimensional square is visited by a three-dimensional sphere, who teaches him to look outside of his perspective. And once the square learns about the third dimension, he tries to convince his fellow 2D shapes, but is jailed for what is considered madness. Perhaps something similar happened here with Bill, with some multi-dimensional being enlightening Bill and sending him down his villainous path. Regardless, the result is the same. Bill ended up killing everyone in Euclidia and moved on to a new universe. From here, Bill found himself in the Nightmare Dimension, where he formed a band of ne'er-do-wells called the Henchmaniacs to help him get up to all sorts of shenanigans.
Didn't I listen to this one
know most
already?
of these characters
Okay.
from the actual show. For 1 trillion years, they robbed banks together, crashed planets together to make them kiss, conquered dynasties, and even recorded a Christmas album. But not all good things can last. Eventually, the Nightmare Realm came apart at the seams as entropy caught up with the universe and destroyed it. Bill then ended up in the series from the universe and was drawn to the area that would someday become Gravity Falls, where he met a shaman who created the prophecy of the 10 cosmic symbols from the series and banished Bill from the area. From here, Bill traveled the world and encountered different societies, the Aztecs, the Egyptians, and the indigenous people of Easter Island. He also explains that Atlantis was real and apparently existed around the time of King Henry VIII. Seems like a major lore drop there, and I really want to know the implications of the whole world just like forgetting Atlantis was a thing, where it was, and how it sank. Fast forwarding past the events of Gravity Falls and Weirdmageddon, it's revealed that Bill did in fact survive being erased along with Stan's memories. He made a deal with the great Axolotl, who promised to let Bill live if he could overcome his greatest trial. The most dangerous thing Bill could possibly face. Therapy. Yeah, really. The Axolotl sends Bill to a dimension outside of time called the Theraprism, where he has to make up for all of his cosmic crimes. What goes around, comes around, huh? Regardless, this book is actually a project that Bill is working on while in therapy, and he smuggled it out of the Theraprism and into our reality against the rules of the institution. But Bill signs off the book by promising that someday he will get out. Someone will let him out, and we might have an idea just to who that is. At the very, very end of the book, I'm talking like the last couple pages, we see a picture of the Bill Cipher statue in the woods from the end of the series. However, if we turn the page...
The people have spoken. Taos is Canada's #1 German-engineered SUV.
Taos? Never heard of it.
Now the new 2025 Taos is even better.
Page, we see that same statue again, but its eye has started glowing. Why would the statue suddenly come to life here? Well, zoom in and look at his hand. A bird is perching on it. Has this bird shaken Bill's hand and unwittingly agreed to become his new host just by looking for a place to land? Maybe. Yeah. In the days leading up to the book of Bill's release, a Twitter account called the Oregon Parks Department opened as a viral marketing campaign and included pictures of a bird known as the Western Meadowlark. Look look at this thing. This is a real bird that is the spitting image of Bill Cipher. The yellow chest even has a little black top hat shape at the top. This little birdie might have just given Bill Cipher the wings he needed to fly out of the Theraprism and back into the world of Gravity Falls once again. So yeah, that's the story of the Book of Bill, and a small hint to where things might be going. But that's just the topmost layer. We've already touched on a few of them, but this book is packed with additional secrets hidden if you read between the lines, and codes to crack that let us know so much more about this world. For instance, the Book of Bill confirms that there's a Gravity Fall multiverse in play here. In the Parallel Dimensions section, Bill points out just how improbable it was that Dipper and Mabel survived all of the events of the show without getting erased, drowned, frozen, or dismembered. But that's only because we're in the only timeline where that didn't happen. Yeah, in basically every other one, Dipper and Mabel die horrible deaths at the hands of all the freaky stuff from the series. What's more, the entirety of this multiverse is actually contained within a Pokemon card, like literally a Pokemon card, in the backpack of an unfathomable being outside of time named Dennis. Considering that our universe is part of this Gravity Falls multiverse, that means that we too are part of this Pokemon card. And it's not even Shadowless. That's tragic. Oh, and speaking of, on this page explaining the Pokemon card multiverse, if you look closely, you'll see a series of symbols running down the side of the card. This is obviously a cipher, and when you decode it, it reads, "Warning, folding this card may result in crossovers." That, in and of itself, is a fun nod to the amount of multiversal crossovers we've gotten in the past few years, but there's actually a lot of crossovers hidden in this very book that create a really wide Disney cartoon cinematic universe. For instance, a Titan skull from the Owl House, another series that Alex Hirsch worked on, can be found in this section about the Dark Ages. Well, there's another rune cipher in that same section that translates to Titan blood. Later on, the Kor's helmet from Amphibia can be seen in the Theraprism alongside Bill. And finally, early on in the Bill Tells All section, Bill is asked if he's the biological father of Phineas from Phineas and Ferb, before ending the interview. Phineas's triangle head suddenly makes a lot more sense, doesn't it? Regardless, all of this alongside Matt's previous theory that Rick and Morty also takes place in this same multiverse really means that there's a giant web of animation that's all connected here. Might just need to do a theory about that sometime, huh? Now, a lot of the hidden codes and mysteries in here are fun, like this Pokemon card connection, but others, well, not so much. Some of them are crazy complicated and hint at a darker story for Bill, one filled with regret and sorrow. For example, there's a code hidden in one of the pages in the Barnes & Noble edition of the book. Yeah, if you didn't know, Barnes & Noble had an exclusive version of the Book of Bill which had additional content. Something that none of us here at Theorist realized until we'd already gotten our copies off of Amazon. Thank God for overnight shipping. Regardless, in the messages on your TV section in the Barnes & Noble edition, at the very bottom of the page, you'll notice a series of square color blocks. At first, I thought this was just a weird, glitchy effect to really drive home the analog nature of this page, with the scan lines and chromatic aberration and all the VHS goodness. But there's actually a pattern to these colors. Yeah, they correspond to letters of the alphabet, and if you decode the right order, it spells out the message: he never sleeps, he never dreams, but somehow still he hears their screams. This has to be about Bill. He isn't sleeping or dreaming, but he's still haunted by the screams of everyone he's killed. This is further driven home on the page covered in silly straws. There's a line of digits that all correspond with episodes of Gravity Falls and time codes within them. And when the words spoken at these time codes are all strung together, we get this message.
Family.
If that was a bit hard to follow, it says, twisted out of shape after the kill, the ghosts of his family are haunting him still. The memory of his parents, his original homeworld, are still haunting Bill, even after all these trillions of years. Also, we actually learn the name of his parents through another code in this book, and this has to be one of the most creative ciphers that I've ever encountered in my time here at Theorist. On the codes page, despite Bill insisting that there are no codes in this book, you'll notice a ring of letters carved into the tree here on this page. That might seem a bit random at first, first, but these letters line up perfectly with something else in the book. All throughout the pages, sometimes there are coffee ring stains that are a perfect size to fit inside this ring of letters. And there are gaps in the rings that line up with individual letters. And not only that, but there are other stains, little dots around the gaps that tell us the order of the letters here. If you spell out all of the letters from the rings and put them in the correct order here, it makes a new message that reads, "His dimension now deceased, Scalene and Euclid, rest in peace." A scalene is a type of triangle with sides and angles of all different lengths and degrees, while Euclid was an ancient Greek mathematician with expertise in geometry. These are the names of Bill's parents, the ones that still haunt his dreams, the ones who he can still hear the screams of. That is so dark and so cool, and one of the best puzzles I've ever encountered in a book like this. Seriously, a clap and a half for Alex here. But for as cool as that is, something's weird here, right? A lot of the codes in this book are written by Bill himself, and you can tell when they are. He has his own very specific way of speaking and his own rune cipher that is consistent for his character. But a lot of these, they don't sound like Bill. Or they're talking about Bill. No, someone else is writing codes in here, and there are a few options. And who it is might end up being very important if Bill is truly coming back through that bird. First option? Well, the clear and obvious choice would be the axolotl. He's already shown to be more powerful than Bill, enough to put him in therapy, so maybe he's trying to help Bill work through some stuff here. But that's also the most obvious option and the most boring. The second and less obvious option? Well, it could be the people that he's possessed over the years. Yeah, for real. We learn in the book that Bill isn't alone inside of his head. At the bottom of the page about skin, there's a section that gets cut off called Learning is Fun. But it's not what you'd expect. Instead of more factoids about skin, we're shown a cry for help from someone named Grebly Himberdrek of Zimtrex 5, one of thousands of souls that Bill has consumed over the years. It's not entirely clear how this would happen, but I think it's a pretty safe guess to say that these souls Bill consumed were the people that he's made deals with, and now they're stuck inside of Bill's mind, where he plays Good Vibrations by Marky Mark and the Funky Bunch on loop forever. That's actor Mark Wahlberg's previous career, by the way. Yes, he was a rapper, really. This also tells me that Alex Hirsch and I have a very similar sense of humor, because I died laughing when I read this and immediately went and listened to the song. As a wise man once said, I want to get mine, so get yours. I want to see sweat coming out your pores. Regardless, we see here that one of these characters was able to take the wheel away from Bill enough to write this blurb. Perhaps they're also writing these secret codes and will help us fight Bill when he comes back. Or maybe the fight will be way more personal, with option number 3, Bill's ex-girlfriend. All throughout the book, Bill makes a point to avoid any questions about his own romantic history. In the love section, he redacts a couple of lines before exclaiming that his ex-partners were not relevant because I don't have any. Yeah, sure, Bill, sure. Later, while introducing his crew of henchmaniacs, one of them is completely scribbled out in red marker with a big label saying, not important. If you look through the red marker, you can barely make out that this character's name is Jessie, and her art looks like she has a lot of eyes, maybe 7 of them. If that doesn't mean anything to you, fair, but if you devoured Journal 3 when it released like we here theorists did, you'll recognize that this character looks and sounds a lot like a character known as the Oracle. This is a 7-eyed woman named Jessel Braun the Unswerving, a name that could easily be shortened to Jessie, a character that Bill clearly doesn't want us to think about because she is his ex-girlfriend. That would explain why Jessie didn't show up in Weirdmageddon. If she and Bill broke up on Beck,
We've already got tons of WestJet points.
Yeah?
Yeah,
Should we?
I'm booking it.
Your next travel story is waiting. Make it happen with the all-new WestJet Rewards.
on bad terms, enough so that Bill wants to scrub her out of his own history? Yeah, she wouldn't want to show up for that. Maybe she's the one who is writing these codes about Bill's regrets, something that she would know as his ex-partner, trying to help us find a way to beat him in the future. To me, that is the most exciting option. Jesse coming back and trying to help defeat her evil ex once and for all. But we'll just have to wait and see. So yeah, all in all, that's the story and the codes hidden in the Book of Bill. It's a lot, and there are puzzles and ciphers here that go even deeper, and weird choices that might not make a lot of sense if you read this book with zero context. Like, for real, I mentioned this earlier, but there are just straight up several pages ripped from The Great Gatsby republished in here. Strange, right? Well, there was a reason for that, one that starts us down a whole new rabbit hole. Let me explain. After we accept Bill's offer at the beginning of the book, it sort of resets, and we're given a new cover and a new page full of all the publishing information of the book. All of this information is now themed around Bill, and at the bottom of the page, we're encouraged to visit thisisnotawebsite.com. If you did that early on, like right after the book was released, you were asked for a password. What was this password? Well, early on in the book, we're given the One True Intelligence test, and one of the puzzles just looked like a bunch of random lines and squiggles. And if you look physically at this image at an extreme angle, the lines form into words and gives you this message. Need a password? Fine, I'll talk. It's the name of the eyeball doc. And guess what? The pages of The Great Gatsby talk about the eyeball doctor, T.J. Eckelberg. Type T.J. Eckelberg into the website, and bam, a whole new world is opened up for us to explore. Okay, so what exactly is thisisnotawebsite.com? When the website was first discovered and this password entered, there was just a countdown clock, and when that hit 0, nothing happened. We were just hit with a series of technical difficulty pages involving Seuss trying to get things working. If you clicked on Seuss, he'd even change up what he was saying, offering links to a full copy of The Great Gatsby and some Gravity Falls themed lo-fi. A lot of people thought that this was part of the ARG, and it might have been. However, Alex Hirsch quickly took to Twitter explaining that sometimes technical difficulties are just technical difficulties. If I were to guess, I don't think Alex, Disney, or anyone else expected the sheer amount of interest in this ARG, and things just weren't ready, or the website went down from the sheer amount of traffic that they were seeing. But eventually, those technical difficulties were ironed out, and the website relaunched, this time featuring a desk within the Mystery Shack complete with haunting music, ambient rain, and a glitchy computer just begging to be toyed with. A ton of the things on this desk are actually interactable. For example, if you click on the Book of Bill here with the dagger in it, it'll open up the book and give us a note for Dipper written by Uncle Ford, telling us that he was mining the book for secrets before chucking it into a bottomless pit. That must have been the portal that let it end up in our reality, where Alex Hirsch got his hands on it and put Bill on the path to the bestsellers list. I guess that this also means that since the book is here in this website in the Mystery Shack, I suppose that this means that this canonically takes place before we get our copies of the book? Hopefully Time Baby isn't going to hunt us down for breaking the timeline. Before we move on, there are a few other treats hidden in this scene too. Like, for instance, if you click on the skull's golden tooth, you're given one Get Out of Debt Free coupon only for use in participating realities. And clicking on the bottle with the eyeball in it will give you a snapshot of the interdimensional portal. Dang, Bill was right, that was very difficult to say out loud. Regardless, this was another portal constructed by dolphins, but unfortunately for Bill, it didn't work out. Porpoises don't got no opposable thumbs. And finally, clicking the McGucket logo on the computer gives us a note left behind by Old Man McGucket. In case you need a refresher, this guy was a surprisingly big player in Gravity Falls. He was a hillbilly who was once a genius, but he voluntarily scrambled his brain after witnessing Bill's antics in the Nightmare Realm firsthand. And now, it looks like his old computer is the key to solving this ARG. See, you can actually type words into this computer, and if it matches something in the computer's database, you're given a clue or an Easter egg.
How did I get inside this computer? How do I get out of here? Bill!
Now, there's a lot of stuff you can type in here, but we're not going to be doing a comprehensive breakdown. If you're looking for that, there are tons of great videos here on YouTube from creators like Hannah Hyperfixates that do a great job of breaking it all down. So, for us here today, we're just going to be focusing on a few key codes, and some that I just kind of thought were funny. Like, I'm not above entering Mabel up 11 billion times and Mabelizing the whole lab. Just makes it feel more like home, you know? Plus, this is where you get Matt's cameo on the website, therefore making all of us theorists here canon in Gravity Falls.
Hello, Internet. This time, you're on your own. Good luck.
just still blows my mind. So where do we even start here? Well, using McGucket's note as a jumping off point, there are a couple of passcodes we can try that are hidden in here. The one of most consequence is Goodnight Sally, and it starts us down a ridiculous rabbit hole. This code pulls up an image of a yellow graphic tee with Bill dancing while the church burns down in the background. Fun, but there's more hidden in this image than first meets the eye. If you zoom in on Bill's left shoe, the one that's outstretched, you may notice a series of small dots and dashes running along the edge of the shoe sole. This is, of course, Morse code, and it spells out Deonarap. That's paranoid backwards. And if you type in Deonarap to the computer, we get a conspiracy board that would make even Pepe Sylvia proud. There's a lot to take in here. Hints that Bill was involved with the Kennedy assassination, had links to inventor Nikola Tesla, and Russian mystic Rasputin, was literally the iceberg that sank the Titanic, and is the reason that the Bermuda Triangle is so funky. Also, you just gotta love Bill's apparent belief that Doritos are a, quote, crude attempt at mockery. That one earned a legit guffaw from me. I love this page, but the reason we're talking about it today is that there's actually a clever puzzle hidden here. All throughout the conspiracy board, you'll notice some strange groupings of letters. An OC here and EHT there. Well, if you find them all and put them all together, it makes the phrase Stad et Tinnock. That's connect the dots backwards. Now, I'll admit I spent an embarrassingly long amount of time trying to connect the dots here on the page to actually make something work before I realized it's just another code. Type that backwards phrase into the website, and once again, you're given a treasure trove of new information. Are you sensing a pattern here? This gives us a chapter of a fictional book called Lesser Known American Cults, and tells us about cyphertologists, described as the first cult in history that was right. By possessing the body of snake oil salesman Silas Birchtree, Bill was able to build himself a following as he turned the city of Orchard Lake, Kansas into Billville. Here, his followers started to build him a portal before the plan was foiled by a rebel named Emmeline Butternubbins. Yes, Butternubbins. I continue to be in awe of Hirsch's ability to name things. Regardless, this chapter ends with a message hidden in Cypher's special alphabet. Translated, it reads, "You can't kill an idea," and typing that into the computer gives us a pamphlet for cyphertologists. Now, this might just seem like the end of this particular rabbit hole, but just put a pin in that. Another rabbit hole we can dive down involves us just typing in the word riddle. This brings up a screen that just asks us, would you like to play a game? And suddenly we are in Saw.
Do you want to play a game?
Of course, you know us, we are absolutely up for this. If you type in yes to answer it, you're again asked a question. This time, what's McGucket's favorite soda? This answer is actually found back in the Book of Bill, on the page depicting the nightmare that is McGucket's mind. In this tornado of awfulness, we can see a can of soda labeled Mountain Don't. I personally prefer Voltage or Baja Blast myself, but you know, personal preference. Type in Mountain Don't, and we're once again given another riddle. Oh boy. Yeah, all in all, there are about another dozen of these riddles, but eventually we're asked the question, Bill Cypher's lawyer? That might seem nonsensical, but this is actually where that pamphlet comes in. If you scour that thing, you'll see that Bill is represented by the law firm Caesar, Atbash, and Visionaire. All of those happen to be the names of 3 very popular code ciphers, so that's a fun Easter egg. Type those in, and you're asked, who defeated Silas Birchtree? If you don't remember, that was the guy Bill took over to lead the cyphertologists, and he was beaten by the hilariously named Emmeline Butternubbins. Type that last name in, and we're finally told we have earned a treat. Follow these instructions, and it'll actually download a zip file onto your computer called Bill's Files Do Not Open. You have to know every cybersecurity alarm in my head is going off right now, but come on, we gotta open this. Don't screw us, Disney. Thankfully, it's just a bunch of wallpapers, a reward for figuring out this ridiculously complex puzzle. And nothing else, right? Well, at this point, we'll see. It feels like everything in this website is part of a greater puzzle, from fun wallpapers to fake law firms on pamphlets. Now, speaking of fake law firms, we can actually summon Bill's very own lawyer and sign away our soul to him, and this starts us down another rabbit hole. Signing over our soul here will turn the flame of this candle blue, signaling that we're now part of Bill. But that's not the only change it makes. Now, we can interact with the knob on this computer, and doing so treats us to some unsettling audio coming out of the static. This is not our first rodeo, theorists. This is clearly some backwards audio, and it says... Someone is begging for help. Someone that Bill killed. Now, right away, this is cool because in the Book of Bill, Bill mentions that he can hear something going on in TV static. So now that we've signed our soul away to him, we can hear too. We can also learn from another code here on the website that one of Bill's phobias is TV static, so he doesn't love how creepy this is. All in all, this is a neat touch and great character building for Bill, but it's also a huge deal for the story of Gravity Falls moving forward. See, in our last theory, we pointed out a section of the Book of Bill where clearly one of the souls that Bill had claimed was somehow using his power to influence the book, writing out pleas for help. Something similar is happening here, just on the website. Someone that Bill has killed is reaching out through this static after we've made our deal with Bill. But who? Well, we actually see them in multiple places throughout this book and this ARG. It's been one of the best secrets hidden in plain sight. See, again in that last theory, we pointed out that it was clear that not all of the writing in the book was done by Bill himself. Obviously, some of the other pages were done by other characters, like Ford, but even some of the secret codes were from other characters, and we figured that was the case because they were talking about Bill. We wondered if it was Jessie the Oracle, the character we identified as Bill's ex, and while that may partially be the case, she's clearly not the only one writing in this book. Like we said, obviously pages from Journal 3 were written by Ford, and he also has some of his own codes hidden throughout the book, and a Viking named Olaf seems to be behind the writing in runes as well. But one of the strangest codes was the color block cipher, first deciphered by Reddit user JimBag777. Yeah, these things were a deep cut, but now we can figure out who wrote these. Huge shoutouts to friend of the channel, Rim Games, for being the first person I saw put this together in his series all about the Book of Bill. In his video solving much of thisisnotawebsite.com, he was able to figure out that the color block codes were coming from very specific people. Bill's family, and the rest of his race, the people of Euclidia. Yeah, the people that Bill admitted to killing in the book. The color block code is just their language. But how do we know this? Well, this is because of a few things. Firstly, one of the color code blocks refers to Bill as Little Billy and talks about his childhood. This was the same affectionate name that Bill's mom used for him, which we see in another color block code. Another color block code translates to some sort of eulogy for Euclidia, something that sounds like it would have been written by a Euclidean, while yet another points us to a Euclidean government agency. And just the cherry on top, you can see the Latin phrase Vallis Cineris, or Valley of Ashes, written on the back wall. Typing that.
Why have people chosen Taos as Canada's #1 German-engineered SUV? Now the new 2025 Taos is even better.
Typing that into the computer gives us a video of little baby Bill being held by his parents, who are obscured and consumed by TV static. And that voice we talked about earlier, it comes back. This confirms that the voice we heard in the static were from the Euclideans, maybe even Bill's parents. Thus why Bill is so terrified of static. Again, huge props to Remy for putting all of that together. Now, you might just think that this is some fun Easter egg, some backstory for Bill, but it's way more than that. This is the key to the future plot points of this series. The people Bill has killed are still in his head, and now with the knowledge that his parents and the other Euclideans are also passing messages along, that's huge. They're also still in his head, and they're the key to beating Bill. Yeah, you heard that right, and there's a ton of proof for this on the website. Like, if you type in Grunkle Stan into the computer multiple times, eventually it'll lead to a pop-up where you can ask Bill how Stan beat him. Clicking through the prompt repeatedly will twist the knife into Bill's ego, and eventually he'll break, revealing a series of increasingly staticky messages. They read, "Sometimes when I close my eye, I can still see," and then 4 messages in the various ciphers from the book. When translated, they read, "Through the eyes of everyone I've ever. Sometimes when I close my eye, I can still see through the eyes of everyone I've ever killed." That's what I bet the message ends as. Then Bill screams. He can't turn it off. That is his weakness. Plus, I've seen a lot of great evidence pointed out by the community that the major human historical figures that Bill talks about in the Book of Bill are also stuck in his head, and they're using Bill's powers against him, trying to warn other characters about Bill's future plans. And with our belief that Bill has once again escaped through the bird that landed on this statue, that is a pretty massive dangling plot thread to leave hanging and have a solution for in the text if they're never going to address it, which is precisely why they are going to address it. See, I believe that they're going to bring back Gravity Falls in a big way, all thanks to this little ARG and your excitement for it, and there's a ton of evidence to prove this. First off, if you type Season 3 into the computer, it spits back out Season 2. Type that in and it gives you Season 1, but if you type that in, well then it gives you Season -1, Anti-Gravity Falls. This is an absolute curveball, and it could mean a lot of things. Maybe this is a spin-off. Maybe it's some sort of new movie or video game or comic or something. But personally, I I think it's pointing towards some sort of prequel series involving Stan or Ford. That's why it's season -1. Alex has gone on record saying that he'd love to do more stories with Stan and Ford, and if he does that story, it needs to be its own book or series.
If I ever wanted to do something with this show more in a animated context, I'm keeping certain material for that. If I'm going to do some adventures with Stan and Ford, either they need their own book or their own miniseries.
But that's just one possibility. It's one I definitely think they're going to be exploring, but it's not the only one. They could also do some sort of sequel series or movie involving all the souls trapped in Bill's head, like we worked out here today. My friend Ryder from Foot of a Ferret actually pitched that out in one of his own recent videos, and it does sound great. And really, I think a continuation of the show just makes sense. This is the same company that made X-Men 97 after all, and with other massive fan favorites from the mid-2010s like Regular Show and Adventure Time getting a ton of continuations and spin-offs, it just fits perfectly. So why? Why haven't they just announced it yet? Why hasn't there been any movement on this despite the massive fan interest in this series and some sort of revival? It's simple, friends. Alex Hirsch legally can't work on it right now. See, back in 2018, Alex signed an agreement with Netflix to exclusively develop shows and movies for the streamer. And we know for a fact that he's still under this contract. In April of 2024, Alex did an interview on the channel Hannah Hyperfixates where he said,
I could probably talk Disney into a miniseries if I was out of my Netflix deal and I really wanted to.
if he could get out of his deal, he's still under contract to produce shows and movies for Netflix. Regardless, this quote was from before the Book of Bill released and was a smashing success, and you best believe that there's some real interest from everyone involved now in making this happen. Just recently at New York Comic Con, Alex said that Disney were the ones that reached out asking him for another Gravity Falls story.
Pink or blue? I don't want blue, honestly.
And now everyone involved realizes that there's a real hunger for more Gravity Falls content, all because of your excitement. You, me, we all made that happen.
Purple.
The only domino left to fall is getting Alex out of his Netflix deal, and I bet there are lawyers working their butts off to make that one happen. Mini theory number 1. Is this the limit for Bill Cipher's power? So, along with giving us just a ton of backstory for Bill Cipher, I believe that the Book of Bill also gives us a good reason as to how and why the Great Axolotl has so much power over Bill. Why Bill is scared of him and doesn't seem to like axolotls in general. Hear me out. So, if you don't know, the Great Axolotl is like the god in the Gravity Falls universe, and he has enough power to both save Bill from the destruction at the end of Weirdmageddon, and then imprison him in interdimensional therapy in the Book of Bill. So, because of that, Bill kind of just tries to avoid the Great Axolotl when and where he can. And it's not just the Great Axolotl that Bill doesn't seem to like. In another Book of Bill theory, we talked about a puzzle hidden on thisisnotawebsite.com that revealed other lost pages of Journal 3. This one tells the story of a pet axolotl given to Ford named Frillium, and how Bill doesn't like the little guy, eventually convincing Ford to release him back into the wild. Bill clearly didn't want this thing that represented the Great Axolotl entity, or maybe even had a slice of his power, anywhere near Ford or the portal they were building. So why? Why is Bill so concerned about axolotls, even if they're not a deity? Why does the Great Axolotl have so much power over Bill? Well, it all might come down to a little bit of science. See, early on in the Book of Bill, Bill mentions that he can invade and possess anything with neurons. Those are nerve cells typically found in the brain or spinal cord that help pilot our nervous systems. This is actually how and why he can manipulate the Book of Bill as we read it. See, the pages of the book are made from pureed human brain matter pressed into sheets and bound together. So, since there are neurons on this page, easy peasy for Bill to change things around. In fact, while we're on that subject, the book itself is just like strangely organic. It has a human spine. Bill asks the reader for blood to use as ink on pages. There are straight up souls inside of it that will scream if the book is burned. You know, it's just as dark as you'd come to expect from Bill Cipher. But here's the thing. Axolotls are pretty unique when it comes to their nervous system and neurons. It's pretty well known that axolotls have incredible healing abilities. They can regrow limbs with ease. They're basically like Wolverine with a straight up healing factor. But this also extends to the neurons in their brains. See, unlike humans and other mammals, the healing of axolotls also extends to their cranium. According to recent studies, axolotls are able to regenerate their brains, even if large portions are damaged or removed. On top of that, they were able to reconnect a lot of the neurons in their brains with each each other too, meaning that the regrown brain had the same functions. If Bill takes control of creatures through the neurons in their brains, and axolotls can regrow damaged neurons, theoretically, axolotls could regrow the neurons infected by Bill, meaning that he wouldn't be able to control them for very long, if at all. That's why he doesn't like regular axolotls, and likely a reason why he's so scared of the all-powerful great axolotl. I guess not even Bill Cipher can beat the science. Despite all of the collective work put into ripping these mysteries apart, we as a community haven't found everything in the book. See, at a recent panel that Alex Hirsch attended at Emotion London 2024, he took to the stage to let us know that we haven't found everything yet.
Now, I'll say most of the secrets of the book since it's come out thanks to Reddit have been discovered. Most of them. I'm not going to tell you where the undiscovered secret is.
Oh, is that a challenge? You know we have to rise to this occasion and take our crack at it. And while no one has found that secret yet, I think I have a hunch about what this puzzle is, and what exactly it means for the future of this series. And if I'm right, this puzzle's gonna show us
I really
a
should have
dimension
done this
where
in a
Bill
different
Cipher
color.
has no power.
This
Might
is
be the key
monotonous.
to defeating him
Pretty,
once
but
and for all.
monotonous.
But by the end of this theory today, I'm not afraid to admit that I might need your help to solve this completely. This is the hardest puzzle in the Book of Bill, after all. So please, grab your code breakers and journals, loyal theorists. We have to take a crack at solving this final puzzle. So, okay, where do we even start with this? There's so much packed into the Book of Bill, and this is not a website.com, that it seems daunting. But thankfully, I do believe we have a lead.
I'm gonna have to
See,
get a
at this
computer.
same panel where he said the puzzle hasn't been
Got
found,
a
Alex
laptop
jokingly
anyway.
scrolled through the Book of Bill
Got a
while
3D
searching
printer.
for a hint, and he landed on a random page, the start of the missing pages of Journal 3 revealed in the Book of Bill. So, I don't know if I need to tell you this, but nothing is random, loyal theorists. This has to be a hint, and I think I know exactly where this thread leads. See, in the corner of this page, you'll notice some art of an axolotl that doesn't actually appear in the Book of Bill. But you can still find this page on the website. Yeah, in the Journal 3 section of the Book of Bill, you'll find a page with a snake on it, and hidden on the snake is one of Bill's ciphers. Translated, it reads Ouroboros. An Ouroboros is a symbol of a snake eating its own tail, symbolizing an unending cycle. It was common in Egyptian, Greek, and Norse myth, and has been used symbolically in everything from the X-Files to Full Metal Alchemist to Ninjago. Regardless, if you enter this code into McGucket's computer, it reveals these missing pages with the axolotl art. Man, this is such a cool puzzle and even fits with the hint hidden here, right? Like an Ouroboros represents an unending cycle, and to get this clue, you need to go back and forth between the website and the book in an infinite cycle. It just makes sense. Regardless, this page tells us about a gift that McGucket once got Ford, a pet axolotl, which he got for Ford because he thought the frills reminded him of Ford's sideburns. Ford even names him Frillium because that's the cutest thing ever, and I think I'm gonna die. Ford was initially delighted by the pet, but at the time he was also working with Bill. Bill did not like the little creature. In fact, he seemed entirely repulsed by it, and told Ford that he shouldn't have any distractions while they worked on their portal together. And so, Ford released the axolotl into a creek behind his lab, and though it looked back at him with a bittersweet sympathy, it left. Of course, if you know anything about Gravity Falls lore, all of this will make sense to you. A strange quirk of axolotl biology means that they can regrow their limbs if they're ever lost, something that Ford finds appealing. As he says, to be wounded but leave no scars. Because of this ability, and along with being entirely adorable and lovable little creatures, axolotls represented rebirth in Aztec mythology. But within the series, the axolotl represents far more than just rebirth. The highest deity within the Gravity Falls universe also takes the form of an axolotl and acts as a direct rival for Bill Cipher. If Bill is a being all about destruction and chaos in a quest for immortality, the great axolotl is the opposite of that. It's a being of healing and rebirth. Now, all of this is a beautiful little story and a good representation of these two cosmic forces sort of pulling on Ford and the rest of the Pines family in a galactic game of tug of war. But there's something else here on these pages, and this is why I think this was the hint from Alex. See, on the second page of this journal entry, there's a little doodle of a, quote, new star system down at the very bottom of the page. Now, this stuck out to me a lot because the study of stars and other star systems just fascinates me, and at first I wondered if this was something very familiar. See, while it's not perfect, it reminded me of the Alpha Centauri star system, which is actually the closest star system to our solar system. But it doesn't really line up super well when you actually, examine it under a microscope. Plus, it says new star system, and we've known about Alpha Centauri for centuries. But despite that, I do wonder if there's some information we can sort of glean out of this. See, in physics and astronomy, there's a principle known as the three.
Get 50 to 60% off deals right now at Old Navy. Juicy looks, juicier prices. Get freshly picked looks for the whole fam this Tuesday through Monday. In store and online at oldnavy.ca.
Body problem. Yeah, that isn't just a solid book series and Netflix show, it's an actual real scientific concept. So, what is it then? Well, when you have two bodies floating out in space affecting one another, like two big stars or planets, it's very easy to use math and science to predict the speeds and locations of those objects far into the future. However, if you add a third body in there, like a third big star or planet, all of a sudden it becomes very hard to make any of the same predictions, to the point where this three-body problem becomes more or less unsolvable. I'm hoping that that isn't a sign of things to come here for this puzzle, and that it is indeed solvable for us, but that doesn't bode very well. But hey, here's the thing. This little doodle was done in blue ink, which is the pen color that's been associated with McGucket throughout all of the This Is Not a Website entries. Plus, on top of that, this isn't the only time we've seen a little solar system doodle like this. Yeah, there's another one in one of the best hidden codes that the Book of Bill has to offer. A little while back, Reddit user Kirkathy was one of the first to notice this little teeny tiny code deep within the fold of 2 pages of the book. You basically have to like crack your book in half to even see it, but when you translate it, it reads, "Destruction is a form of creation." That seems very much like something Bill would believe, wouldn't it? Well, typing this into the website gives us another clue, and I believe this is the end game for this whole mystery. Yeah,
it's telling you to take the book apart.
Wild. It's a note page from McGucket's personal notebook that is just scribbled from left to right, top to bottom, with text and equations and doodles and codes.
Like Full Metal Alchemist.
If you look down at the sticky note at the bottom of the page, you'll notice a similar looking solar system drawn in the same colors. Yeah, it's not quite the same, but enough that I feel like these have to be connected. Oh, and before you suggest that this is an atom, there's actually an atomic drawing elsewhere on the page that is a different style. So this leans much more in the design of a solar system than an atom. Regardless, because of that connection, is there something else on this page that could lead us to some answers? Well, the most obvious thing here is this giant drawing cutting through the middle of the page, which has McGucket concluding that there is a giant hole in space-time, and this might be the key to stopping Bill. But here's where the difficulty of the puzzle comes into play. No one, us at Theorist HQ included, have been able to quite figure out what this page is pointing to yet, and believe me, that is not for a lack of trying. For example, a few of the talented theorists over at the Gravity Falls Reddit and Discord have taken to overlaying parts of the Book of Bill or those unlockable wallpapers we discussed in our last theory onto this note page. And honestly, while that sounds absolutely bonkers on paper, but tish, certain things do line up super well. Maybe well enough to not be a coincidence. Like, one of the wallpapers is a Bill Cipher themed Ouija board. And if you line up the yes and no on the board with the yes and no and the infinity symbol on this note page, well, one guess of what lines up with the big hole in space if you do this. Yeah, that's the symbol of Bill on the Ouija board. That's really compelling, and only one of the things they found that lined up really well. Maybe there is something more going on to this here. But while that is super fascinating and might lead somewhere, that's not what I want to talk about with this page. No, instead, what I want to focus on is something a bit more surface level here. See, one of the big pieces of text on this page reads, "I cannot see him, he is blind." At first, that might seem like a little bit of a confusing phrase, but in the Book of Bill, we learn that Bill once possessed McGucket's brain and left because it was just too much for him. I believe that this left McGucket forever scarred, and also led him to find a way to completely shield himself from Bill, a way to never be seen by him in his all-seeing eye ever again. So, cannot see him, he is blind. And, well, I believe that McGucket found one. If you notice on the sides of the grid, there are 2 numbers that are circled, column 12 and row 20. If you cross-reference these on the actual sheet, you'll notice that they line up with the number 35. And there's a space right before 35 that itself is circled and labeled weak point. And if this weak point is right before 35, I would presume this has to be 34. Now, that could just be a coincidence, but this isn't the only time we've seen 34 in this ARG, or is it the only time that it's said to be a blind spot for Bill? If you type 7 eyes into the website, it brings up a Polaroid portrait of a shadowy figure. And if you squint, you can make out that this is Jessel Brom the Unswerving. This is the Oracle from Journal 3, and if our previous Book of Bill theory is correct, she's also Bill's ex-lover and former henchmaniac that betrayed him. Now, that in and of itself is fascinating, that she'd be referenced again here in this ARG. But if you flip the Polaroid over, it reveals the message, leave him. Escape to Dimension Blank. It's against the rules, but it's the one reality where you may be safe from him. Clearly, she's talking about Bill here, and the desire to find a reality that's shielded from him. Perhaps some sort of weak point. Just like what's labeled on McGucket's page. If that's too much of a stretch for you, like, hey, that's fair. But it's not all. See, at the bottom of this flipped Polaroid, barely visible in the dark ink, you'll find another code. When you translate it, it reads, set chords for dimension reality. That's reality spelled with the number 34, like leet speak. Also, it is not beyond me that Alex absolutely slipped a subtle R34 joke into a Disney project. Absolute king. Regardless, there's that connection again. 34, reality. A weak spot where Bill can't see, and the one reality where you may be safe from him. All of it lines up, clearly. Dimension 34, this reality, is a blind spot for Bill. Or maybe it's even more dangerous than that. Maybe it could be the end of the entire multiverse. See, if you type reality with the 34 into thisisnotawebsite.com, you're given a bunch of photographs of Bill's friends, the henchmaniacs, explaining that they've found a new home. We know from Gravity Falls Lost Legends, the first Gravity Falls comic, that the henchmaniacs survived Weirdmageddon, and this tells us that they've somehow escaped the Nightmare Realm and now they're living in Dimension 34. Bad news, right? Well, it could get even worse. Another interpretation of McGucket's note is that reality is not a weak point for Bill, but one for the entire fabric of space-time. This could explain why Jesse's message on the Polaroid says that going there is against the rules. If it's a weak point for the entire multiverse, one wrong move could unravel everything. With that in mind, it's not a far leap to assume that maybe this reality is comprised of some sort of antimatter. If you don't know, antimatter is a real scientific concept. It's basically like negative matter. For every atom of real material, there's an equal and opposite particle of antimatter. And should matter and antimatter ever come into contact, well, the results could be explosive. So, going to a dimension of antimatter, one that's a weak spot potentially for the whole multiverse, could be bad news. Plus, in our last theory, we speculated that a series called Anti-Gravity Falls might be one of the ways the franchise moves forward, either as a prequel or a sequel. Perhaps some sort of anti-gravity falls, as in the town lies inside of this Dimension 34, and Dipper and Mabel and everyone else is going to have to go there to defeat Bill. Mini theory number 2, is Dimension 34 from the Book of Bill just our universe? The real world? In one of our previous theories, we suggested that there was a dimension in the Gravity Falls multiverse where Bill has no power. There was a lot of evidence pointing towards this dimension being Reality 34, or just reality, spelled like that. But we also asked for your help to do some more digging to really make this theory a home run. And one of the biggest suggestions I saw was that reality was actually the real world, literally our universe. The thought process here comes down to the fact that the photographs we see of the henchmaniacs in reality are all incredibly realistic, far more realistic than most of the other art we've seen in Gravity Falls, or that was made for the Book of Bill, or thisisnotawebsite.com.com. That would mean that our world is the safe point outside of Bill's nearly omnipotent power, and maybe that future Gravity Falls media could include a live-action series or a game. I think it makes a lot of narrative sense, but sadly, I just don't think it quite works out. Let me break down why. Firstly, we know for certain that Bill has been able to look into the real world. That's literally how the Book of Bill interfaces with us as readers. We are interacting with him through the book and the ARG website. On top of that, we previously did a theory suggesting that Bill had possessed Gravity Falls creator Alex Hirsch, which was confirmed in the Book of Bill. If our reality was a blind spot for Bill,
shit in your hair, dumbass.
How would he be able to do either of those things, or even communicate with us from the Theraprism? But on top of that, we also have to keep in mind the 2016 Gravity Falls scavenger hunt, the Cypher Hunt, which ended with a life-size statue of Bill being discovered in Reedsport, Oregon. Back in the day, the Cypher Hunt implied that the statue was literally the one we saw from the cartoon series, and that therefore the animated series was set in our reality. But the new information we have from the Book of Bill makes it pretty clear that our reality is a separate one from Gravity Falls. The book is thrown through a dimensional portal in the Gravity Falls universe and ends up here in the real world. That would mean that this statue from the Cypher Hunt was from a different time that Bill Cypher had entered our universe. My God, that this is from when Alex Alex Hirsch first made his deal with Bill, assuming that Matt's final Gravity Falls theory is correct. Either way, it means that Bill has been in our world before, has used his powers to make deals here, and therefore that this is not reality. So yeah, well, it's a great idea, and you guys are awesome for putting the pieces together. I sadly just don't think it quite works. Still though, it wouldn't surprise me to see a live-action installment to the franchise because of these realistic pictures of the Hinchmaniacs. Now, the real question is whether or not they'll be as vomit-inducing as the other live-action Disney remakes. But hey, that's just a theory. A film theory! And cut! Up next on Film Theory.
The blacklight edition of Journal 3 sent me down a rabbit hole that led me to only one conclusion. Alex Hirsch, creator of Gravity Falls, he is Bill Cipher. Or rather, he's possessed by Bill Cipher in the real world.
What did you bring back from your last trip? A taste for dumplings, a bit of local art, a poncho story, a new wake-up call. Everywhere you go, Marriott Bonvoy shapes you, making you the greatest souvenir of all.
So you found an awesome job post, but your resume is outdated? No worries. With Adobe Acrobat Pro's super easy editing tools, you can quickly make updates right in the PDF without needing to find the original Word doc. Just click what you want to modify, and in seconds you'll have a resume that you can
Shit.
Now go and have that dream job with Adobe Acrobat.
Fuck it, work with it.
Free 7-day trial now.
Ooh.
Oh, so you thought putting 27 movies in a timeline was hard? You ain't seen nothing yet. Today we're putting more than 60 films into one cohesive timeline, creating the Disney theory to end them all. Hello, internets! Welcome to Film Theory, the show that always says, hey, theorists! So, for as much as we get on them for the strange, often awful decisions they make, Disney has made a lot of great movies over the 100 years they've been around. Specifically, their animation is some of the most beloved in the world. There's a lot of genuine nostalgia for these stories, and I wondered, well, what if they were all part of the same story? What if there was one complete, cohesive Disney timeline of the Disney universe? The Disneyverse, if you will. Now, you may have seen this sort of idea around the internet before, specifically with the Pixar theory. This was a fun project originally created by John Negroni and picked up by fellow theorists like the Super Carlin brothers, trying to fit all of the Pixar movies into one complete timeline. It's a big challenge, and one that I really respect those creators for taking on. And I wanted to throw my hat into the ring with something similar. The Disney theory, doing the same thing with all of Disney's movies. Matt had previously connected a handful of Disney movies with cameos and Easter eggs, but I wanted to do them all, from Snow White to Moana 2. And it turned out much longer than I anticipated. Like, seriously, I was thinking this would be a special 25 to 30-minute video. And this turned into an epic that was over 45 minutes. So, yeah, this is a multi-part series with part 2 coming by the end of the month. So, okay, how are we going to be doing this? What are our rules? Like, most of Disney's movies are pretty ambiguous about when and where they take place, and putting them all together is going to be a bit janky. But basically, we're going to be looking at all of the historical settings, landscapes, clothes, source material, cameos, and Easter eggs across all of the films to tie them together as best we can. And shoutouts to the awesome fan wikis and channel Mickeyology for being great resources for a lot of the information regarding all of that jazz. They were excellent starting points and just invaluable for us today. Regardless, the most important thing for us is to make sure that the main 62 films in the Disney canon fit in here. If you don't know, the Disney canon are the movies made specifically by Walt Disney Animation Studios. This is Disney's main animation studio that makes their tentpole, big-budget movies directly associated with the Disney brand. Just to be clear, that doesn't include other studios they've owned, the likes of Pixar, or Blue Sky Studios, or Image Movers, or whatever. Like, those are their own things, and maybe we'll get to them someday. For the most part, it also doesn't include works from Disney Toon Studios or Disney Television Animation. Those were the people behind the direct-to-video sequels or animated series spin-offs for the main Disney canon. That being said, sometimes these sequels and spin-offs will have details that will help us definitively place the movies or support the worlds that we're building here. In those cases, we'll be using them, but we will make sure to call that out. But again, the most important thing for this theory is getting those main 62 films placed. Those extras are just a nice bonus if they fit in too. Oh, and just one more thing while you're watching this, I want you to be thinking. who would win in a fight? Moana, Elsa from Frozen, or Rapunzel from Tangled? I think there's a good case for all three of them, but please leave your thoughts down in the comments below. If you think it's Moana, please make sure you use the word horizon in your comments. For Elsa, use glacier, and for Rapunzel, use toupee. They're on screen right now if you want to make sure that you get them right. Including the word assigned to the princess you think would win in your comment will help us tally up the results, and I'll let you know who wins in part 2. And hey, maybe we can turn this into a theory, a whole Disney princess battle royale. Honestly, it sounds hilarious, and I'm so down. But with all of that done and dusted, loyal theorists, let's get right into the magic. Okay, so right off the bat, there's a common thread that ties all of the movies in the Disney canon together, and it's a sprinkling of that Disney magic. No, I mean literally, Disney magic. The thing that distinguishes this universe apart from ours is magic, whether that be through talking animals or ghosts or just straight up wizards. So the first thing to do here is figure out, where does that magic come from? Well, the answer is simple. Stars. I'm talking wishing stars, shooting stars, magic from the sun, which is just a big old star. For whatever reason, in the Disneyverse, stars are inherently magical and can pass that magic along to whatever they touch. And that is, well, everything. See, in the real world, everything is made of star stuff, elements that were first created inside of stars. The same thing is happening here, just with magic alongside the science. As the corniest song in Wish put it. After the Big Bang and the formation of all these magic stars, the first thing we see is the Rite of Spring sequence from Fantasia, which shows us the formation of Earth and the development of life, leading up to the age of the dinosaurs. That naturally takes us to Disney's dinosaurs, set in the Cretaceous period at least 65 million years ago, when the dinosaurs would have existed alongside the ancestors of lemurs. But of course, the dinosaurs couldn't last forever, and just like in our universe, a meteor impacts the planet and kills them off. We actually see a lot of them die in that same Rite of Spring sequence in Fantasia. It's dark. But that wasn't the end of life on the planet, and in fact, the star magic would basically supercharge the rest of the life on Earth. In Fantasia 2000, the humpback whale sequence opens up with the star shining down on the ocean, and then the Northern Lights. This is a phenomenon caused by the Earth's magnetosphere interacting with the sun's light. The sun itself is just a star, so that makes the Northern Lights magic in this universe. And believe me, we'll get to that in a second. Regardless, this sets the stage for magic to spread across the skies, allowing those whales to take flight. We're dating this sequence back to 120,000 years ago, after humpback whales migrated to the pine tree populated northern hemisphere, but before the most recent ice age fully set in. And along with these flying humpback whales, all of the magic also allows for the emergence of various creatures that are only legends in our world. Giants and dragons, nymphs and fairies, mermaids, and all manner of mythological beasts and supersized species. Additionally, it left many animals capable of understanding human speech, and gifted some with the ability to speak, though that doesn't really become relevant until much, much later. This brings us to the dawn of human civilization, with the rise of Atlantis around 13,000 BC, as seen in Atlantis, the Lost Empire. Just to put that into perspective, that would have been during the last ice age. The technology of Atlantis was driven by magic crystals above the city, which were conspicuously compared to stars.
Bright light, like a star, floating above the city.
Further proof that magic comes from stars in this world. However, as the Atlantean Empire thrived, other less advanced human civilizations were also popping up across the world, each with their own relationship with this star magic. For instance, we have Brother Bear, set in what is now Alaska, around 9,500 BC. We can place it there since it takes place in that sweet spot between the last ice age wrapping up, but before the extinction of the Columbian Mammoth. In the film, we once again see traces of magic from the stars and the Northern Lights. I told you we'd be getting back to that one. And in Brother Bear, we see this magic has the power to interact with both human and animal spirits, literally transforming Kenai into a bear. Across the planet, humans start recognizing the power of magic and sought to bottle it up and harness it for themselves. Sometimes they did this in the literal bottles. This gave rise to races of magical beings like the genies, concentrated personifications of that wishing magic. Unfortunately, we know from the Aladdin animated series that genies were later hunted to near extinction, perhaps due to some backlash against magic, considering the devastation that could occur if it fell into the wrong hands. Only a few survivors, like Aladdin's genie, were spared and hidden away in places like the Cave of Wonders. We can actually clock genies' imprisonment starting in 8600 BC, since
10,000 years will give you
Such a crick in the neck.
and we know that a Aladdin takes place in 1400 AD, but we'll get there, I promise. And here is where we get to the most pivotal point in the early Disneyverse, year 7000 BC and the fall of Atlantis, as seen in that movie's prologue.
The people have spoken. Taos is Canada's #1 German-engineered SUV. Now the new 2025 Taos is even better.
Yeah, I gotta figure out how I have to use colored clay. It'll be a lot faster.
Atlantis accidentally nuked to the whole planet and created a giant tidal wave. Whoopsie, this led to the sinking of Atlantis in a great flood that hit the entire planet, as referenced by Milo and Kida later in the movie.
Such knowledge has been lost to us since the time of the Mayberry moment.
Oh, great flood. This is also where the Noah's Ark sequence from Fantasia 2000 would fit in, where we see Noah save the animals and ferry them to the only sliver of land that's not completely submerged. So that's good news for Noah and his animals, but what about the rest of humanity? Kind of hard to come back from the whole world getting flooded, isn't it? Well, thankfully, there were parts of civilization, like Avalonia from Strange World, that were able to survive on the backs of giant turtles. Yeah, really. These were likely created by the magic that brought back life after the dinosaurs, and we see in Strange World that they're using the flooded planet as their own personal swimming pool. And believe it or not, but this isn't even the only example of this we see in the Disney canon. In the direct-to-video sequel Aladdin and the King of Thieves, the game discovered the remnants of an ancient civilization built on the back of a giant turtle. Sound familiar? That's just further proof that humans were forced to resettle on the backs of these giant turtles until the continents re-emerged. Oh, and just as a little bonus here, we actually have a direct connection between Atlantis and Strange World. We see an Atlantean book written in its distinctive language at the end of Strange World, suggesting that the fall of Atlantis was studied by the surviving humans. However, eventually Avalonia would have been flooded again as the giant turtles died, or just decided to go back underwater. They got a little divine intervention from some very powerful individuals, thus beginning Disney's Age of the Gods. Yeah, at this point, higher powers swoop in to reshape the world and fix the mess left behind by Atlantis. The first to step up is Te Fiti, who raised the land from the ocean and unflooded the planet.
In the beginning, there was only ocean, until the mother island emerged.
But Te Fiti was only one such powerful being. There were others, including the Titans and other giant monsters like Tamatoa, who brought chaos to the world. Earthquakes and volcanoes that never slept. Enter other pantheons like the Greek gods, who imprisoned the Titans and monsters beneath the seas to help humanity thrive. These prisons became small worlds unto themselves, like Lalotai in Moana, and Wonderland in Alice in Wonderland. Even some powerful mortal sorcerers were imprisoned in similar worlds or trapped in items like cauldrons. Dang, man, Zeus don't mess around. Regardless, only creatures that could feasibly coexist with humans were allowed to hang around. Dragons and mermaids were left off the hook, as were certain demigods like Maui, who set humanity up for success by taming nature. Speaking of demigods, this actually leads us to the story of Hercules, set in 1000 BC. We know this thanks to a date we can see on a credit card in the movie. Guess all that wish magic also got capitalism a jumpstart in this timeline. This film also shows us that gods are still running the show, since we see the Greek pantheon and Hercules almost ascend to become one of them. Oh, and just before we move on, Hercules also lets us place the Lion King and all of its ancestor star magic roughly at the same time. See, one of the famous labors of Hercules in Greek myth to prove that he was a hero was killing the Nemean lion, a beast that was terrorizing the town of Nemea. Well, in the Disney movie, we see Hercules wearing a lion pelt that is identical to Scar. So somehow, Scar survived being attacked by the hyenas, and the Lion King made his way up to Greece and was eventually defeated by Hercules. And just to get it out of the way, yes, the Timon and Pumbaa series features those two in the modern day, but those aren't the same Timon and Pumbaa from the movie universe. Timon in the films has 5 stripes on his back, but only 3 in the show, so it's non-canon or some weird alternate universe. But enough about that, let's get back to the Disney gods. Something happened that drove the gods away, or made them take a hands-off approach moving forward. And that thing was the Druun, from Raya and the Last Dragon. In the year 800 BC, dark entities known as the Druun spread across the world, with the power to turn any creature into stone. And though you might not be able to kill a god, you can trap them forever on a rock. So how can we put this at 800 BC? Well, we know that the Druun rose to power 500 years before the main events of Raya.
Well,
That all began 500 years ago.
And given the presence of iron weapons and crossbows in the main story, we can estimate that Raya is set around 300 BC. So 500 years before that would make this 800 BC. Regardless, after the gods left, magical beings called dragons defeated the Droon in the fictional Southeast Asian subcontinent of Kumandra, though they were themselves trapped in stone. 500 years later, the Droon were released once again during the main events of Raya before being defeated once and for all. With the Droon finally gone for good, humanity once again thrives. Though Polynesia suffers after the demigod Maui steals the heart of Te Fiti and triggers a slowly encroaching wave of darkness that drains life from the islands across the Pacific. Don't worry, we'll get back to that story shortly, but first we have to take a brief pit stop in Europe. Here we have the Black Cauldron. Yeah, I bet you forgot about this one. Honestly, I thought that this one was going to be a challenge since it takes place in a fantasy world known as Prydain, until I dug into it and discovered that Prydain is just another name for the country of Wales in Great Britain, thus setting it firmly on Earth. Anyway, this film has to take place around the 500s AD, since the helmet that Taran imagines himself wearing resembles a Spangen helm, a real type of helmet popular during this century. Likewise, this leads us directly into the Sword in the Stone, set just a slight jaunt away in 500s England. Here, King Arthur rises to power to become a legendary hero under the tutelage of the mage Merlin. This is the date range typically given for Arthurian legend, which more or less lines up with what we see in the film. We're also going to set the famous Sorcerer's Apprentice story from Fantasia here, which sees the sorcerer Yen Sid and his apprentice, a strange humanoid mouse creature named Mickey. These animal-human hybrids will become much more common later on in the timeline and are likely the result of star magic really fast-tracking evolution of other species. Anyway, we're placing this here because of the similarity between Yen Sid and Merlin's attire.
Alright,
And the
I'm gonna
similar
figure
use
it
of
out. What
magic.
am I doing?
That's not to say they're the same character, but they are clearly peers. And now, back to the Pacific to round out the first millennium. We have Moana and Moana 2. These are set in Polynesia during the 900s, and we can chalk this day up to some real-world history. See, Moana's story unfolds during a period called the Long Pause. This was a time when the exploration of the ocean by the Polynesian peoples stalled for over 1,000 years, and ended in the 10th century. Well, in the Disneyverse, this came to an end thanks to Moana's adventure to Te Fiti, which reignites the desire to explore in her people. What's up, guys? Future Lee here. I just saw Moana 2 and wanted to talk about how it impacts the timeline. Mostly, it doesn't. There was a joke in this movie where Maui said that the gods might have butt-dialed Moana, and no one knew what he was talking about, but that it would make sense in about 2,000 years. At first, that concerned me because, hey, that doesn't line up with present day, especially if this is set in like 900 AD. But there are multiple other instances where it does line up with that timeline of about 900 AD. The last Tautai before Moana is said to have been about 1,000 years ago, which lines up with the Great Pause. And likewise, Mutangi, the Bat Lady, was trapped in the giant clam for 1,000 years. Again, all of that lines up with the Great Pause, so we're going to say that Dwayne Johnson just ad-libbed that line and this then gets us to the start of a new millennium, and before we go further here, I have to make a note. Not every kingdom depicted in the Disney universe has a great real-world analog. Like, some of them might have been one of the thousands of small petty kingdoms that popped up around Europe in the Middle Ages before merging or getting eaten up by a larger kingdom or nation, but in the Disneyverse, it seems like plenty of these lands continued to dot the map as independent states for a prolonged period, at least up until the 20th century. For example, according to Disney, Wish is set in the 1200s off the southern coast of Spain. If I were to guess, it takes place on Ibiza, or a similar island in the Mediterranean, allowing for travelers from all over Europe and Africa to find their way there. That would also make it a prime candidate to spread parts of its culture across the region, and why we see so many early versions of classic fairy tale stuff like fairy godmothers and magic mirrors in Wish before they pop up in other European stories. Like, for instance, Sleeping Beauty. Thankfully, this one is easy. It takes place within the borders of what is now France in the 1300s.
Now, Father, you're living in the past. This is the 14th century.
Gotta love when they make it easy. And all...
Get 50 to 60% off deals right now at Old Navy. Juicy looks, juicier prices. Get freshly picked looks for the whole fam. This Tuesday through Monday. In store and online at oldnavy.ca.
And also, shout-outs to Maleficent, who is one of the many dark wizards who seems to be taking advantage of the darker side of this star magic. From here, things start to get busy. Particularly, the 1400s were huge for our Disney timeline. First up, we have The Emperor's New Groove, set in Peru during the era of the Incan Empire. So we're going to plop this one in the early 1400s. We also get another example of magic in this world, transforming a human into an animal, which is just very much a recurring theme in the Disneyverse. Next up, we have one of my personal faves, Mulan, set in China, and we can actually determine the exact year this takes place in. See, despite the legend dating back all the way to the 400s AD here in the real world, the Disneyverse Mulan takes place much later, since we see both the Great Wall of China and the Imperial Palace, the latter of which wasn't completed until around 1420 AD. Then, in Mulan 2, we see a calendar that dates the film to the year of the Fire Ox. That only occurs once every 60 years, and the first year of the Fire Ox after the completion of the Imperial Palace was in 1457. Also worth noting that the Fa family guardians like Mushu were dragons trapped in stone, very similar to the dragons we saw in Raya. Perhaps the Drune had an impact here in China as well. Regardless, we can actually use the Imperial Palace to place Aladdin around the same time, since he and Jasmine finished their whole New World date by watching fireworks over the Imperial Palace in the Forbidden City. Now, before you say anything, I know there's a popular theory out there that suggests that Aladdin takes place in the far future, since Genie makes a ton of modern pop culture references despite being locked up in the lamp for 10,000 years. But this isn't the case, and those timey-wimey references can actually be explained thanks to the Aladdin animated series. See, in one episode, Aladdin and his friends travel back in time to the founding of Agrabah. Here, the mystical sands of time are spilled onto the site where the city would be founded, and Genie ends up bottling up some of the time travel magic for himself to use whenever he wants. This might be a bit weird and retroactive, but this is likely how his past self knew about all of those modern references. Time travel is just super confusing, man. Those sands of time might also explain how crossover episodes like the one we see between Aladdin and Hercules can happen, despite those two movies being separated by thousands of years. Just wild stuff. Besides, Genie isn't even the first to do this. All the way back in The Sword and the Stone, Merlin used to take vacations in the 21st century on a regular basis. And finally, rounding out the 1400s, we can hop back over to France where we see the events of the Hunchback of Notre Dame. If this is anything like the Victor Hugo novel it's based on, that means it's set in the year 1482. And it also shows us another example of star magic bringing things to life, like with the gargoyles. Oh, and before you call out that Beauty and the Beast should fall here because we see a woman who looks like Belle cameo in this movie, it can't. There are other factors in Beauty and the Beast that place it later on. But both of these movies are set in France. Perhaps this is an ancestor of Belle's who just happens to look a lot like her. And now, probably 10 plus minutes into our timeline here, we finally get to the very first Disney animated film, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Using where the original fairy tale originated, as well as the aesthetic look of the era and the use of minecart technology, we can place this firmly in what is now Germany in the 1500s. Then there's Pocahontas, set in Virginia during 1607. That's literally spelled out for us in the first few lyrics of the film. Again, love when they make it easy and somewhat consistent with real-world history, even if the rest of the film isn't at all. Though, again, this movie does show us the long-term impacts of the star magic on the nature of the Disneyverse, with elemental forces like wind and trees literally being alive in this world. Anyway, this leads up into Beauty and the Beast, which is set in France during the mid to late 1700s. We know this thanks to the aesthetic look of the era and Cogsworth referencing Rococo architecture, which prominently emerged in the 1730s. We actually covered when and where this takes place in an old episode of Food Theory, so go check that out. Just a few decades later, we have the Legend of Sleepy Hollow segment from The Adventures of Ichabod and Mr. Toad. This is Disney's version of the Headless Horseman story. It's based on another real-world book by Washington Irving set in 1790. Nothing contradicts that in the movie, so that's where we're gonna put it. Similarly, we can put the Legend of Johnny Appleseed from Melody Time in the early 1800s. That movie's hero was based on a real person from around that same time. Jumping back to Europe, and something much more made up, we have Tangled and all of its various spin-off series and shorts. This whole little mini-franchise was kicked off by a bit of that star magic giving healing powers to a flower.
A single drop of sunlight fell from the heavens, and from this small drop of sun grew a magic golden flower.
Regardless, this is set in the fictional France-adjacent kingdom of Corona in the late 1830s or early 1840s. How do we know that? Well, the animators researched fashion from that time frame while making the film. Plus, we know that Rapunzel and Eugene attend Elsa's coronation at the end of Frozen, and we know when that film takes place. Speaking of which, we know that Frozen and all of its nature ice magic is set in the small Scandinavian kingdom of Arendelle, in what is now modern-day Norway, exactly in the year 1843. And that day we have thanks to a map dated 1840 that Anna and Elsa's parents had on their ship when it sank. And given that there's a 3-year time gap between that tragedy and the events of Frozen, it's just basic math. Similarly, Frozen 2 is set 3 years after the first film, landing it in 1846. Jumping forward a couple of decades, we have Alice in Wonderland, which sees Alice exploring one of these strange prison worlds originally created by the Disney gods at the start of the whole timeline. A lot of weird stuff has been allowed to evolve here on its own, thus the Cheshire Cat, Card Kingdom, etc., etc. Like Sleepy Hollow, Alice in Wonderland is based on a real book by Lewis Carroll, which took place in the 1860s. Unfortunately, not every movie is going to have a dated map or be based on a real book. For example, there's the Pecco Spill segment from Melody Time, based on the American cowboy folk hero. To date, this one, beyond just Old West times, we had to take a look at the clothes. Specifically, how one character is shown wearing a bustle. This was a part of a dress meant to push up the rear of the skirts and became a prominent part of American and British fashion in the 1870s. That lines up with the real-world legend of Pecco's Bill, so that's where we're going to be planting this one. Similarly, bustles also show up in Cinderella, which places that movie in the 1870s, and the landscape of the kingdom shown in the film resembles the real-world region of Occitania in southern France, which tracks for the location. Also worth noting that this movie has yet another appearance of a wish-granting magical being like the genie and the fairy godmother, and small sentient talking critters like the mice, further showing the impact star magic has had on the Disneyverse and just how different it is from our world. But another important thing that Cinderella does for us, it lets us place exactly where the Little Mermaid goes in our timeline. Here, let me explain. We know that the movie takes place on Prince Eric's island kingdom set in the Mediterranean, likely near the real-world island of Corsica. This would explain the various characters and visual influences from nearby European cultures like Britain, Italy, and France.
Nice young ladies. Just don't swim around rescuing people in the middle of the ocean.
Oh, you're gonna love it. Chef's been fixing this specialty. Stuffed crab.
How I love le poisson!
But the thing that really cements this time and place and why it's connected to Cinderella? Well, the king and the Grand Duke from Cinderella are shown attending Eric's wedding to Ursula, which was put together in less than a day. So Eric's kingdom would have to be close enough to southern France for them to make it to the ceremony on time. Corsica was even connected to France by telegraph by the year 1870, allowing for quick messages to make it to the characters of Cinderella. Plus, in Cinderella 2, Dreams Come True, the king and the Grand Duke rush off explaining,
We have important matters of state to attend to.
important matters of state. Perhaps like a royal wedding? They even pack up a ton of just random valuables, likely wedding gifts they had to get on a quick turnaround. And they return just 2 days later. All of it just fits. And just to dot our I's and cross our T's, the direct-to-video sequel, The Little Mermaid 2, Return to the Sea, references the opera singer Enrico Caruso.
When I was a teenager, I had this high, squeaky voice, and then one day, I sound like Caruso.
Caruso's career began in the 1890s, so the first film being set in the 1870s would allow for Eric and Ariel to marry, enjoy life a bit, and then have a preteen daughter by the 1890s. Now, that took a bit of maneuvering to figure out, but something that's much easier for us, Home on the Range, which was set in the American Old West in 1889. The movie straight up lays this out for us thanks to a date listed on a deed. I love it when they make it just stupid easy for us, even if it's a stupid cow movie. Another easy one for us that is remarkably less stupid and cow adjacent is The Jungle Book, set in India during the 1890s. We know this since that's the year that Rudyard Kipling's original book was published, and it's backed up by a line in the movie. It's the decade following Colonel Hatti's service as a war elephant, which he references in this line. So, believe it or not, but placing most of these movies was actually easy compared to what we see in the rest of the films. Like, for real, how on earth do you figure out where Robin Hood, Chicken Little, and Zootopia go? How do you possibly go from what's in Lilo and Stitch to what we see in Treasure Planet? And Disney, the company, straight up exists in Wreck-It Ralph. How does that work? Well, loyal theorists, we figured all of that out and more. And if you want to find out how, you'll need to subscribe for part 2 when it comes out later this month. Don't forget to leave a comment with the code word for the princess you think would win in a fight. But for now, remember that it's all just a theory. A film theory. And cut. Up next on Film Theory. And it's here where we come to another pivotal moment in the Disneyverse, just from the sheer amount of important elements that all happened in one place. Pinocchio, which takes place in Italy.
Now you can shop smarter at Canadian Tire. With same-day delivery for $9.99. For a solution that's right under your nose. Shop smarter at Canadian Tire.
Fruit on the bottom.
Astro yogurt with fruit on the bottom. Seriously.
welcome to Film Theory, the show that always wishes upon a star no matter who you are. So, if you've been around YouTube, you may have seen something called the Pixar Theory floating around from creators like the Super Carlin brothers. The idea there is to take every single Pixar film and try to put them into a single story. This Pixar theory is a monumental feat, but I looked at it and thought, what if we could do something bigger? What if we could take all of Disney's main animated movies and do something similar, putting them all into a single story and creating the ultimate Disney theory? Last time we covered everything up to about the year 1900, ranging from the Big Bang and the creation of Earth all the way up to the interactions between the kingdoms we see in European fairy tales, like Cinderella and The Little Mermaid. But how does all of this connect to the likes of Wreck-It Ralph, Lilo and Stitch, or Zootopia? Well, friends, today we're gonna find out. Oh, and just before we hop in, last time I asked you all which Disney princess you thought would win in a fight: Elsa, Moana, or Rapunzel. And let me tell you, loyal theorists, y'all delivered. This was my highest commented video ever, in the top 5 highest commented videos of Film Theory this year. Thank you so much for sharing your ideas and really thoughtful reasoning on this whole subject. You guys are awesome. So, who did you think would win? Well, the audience picked by a landslide, or rather an avalanche, was Elsa, mostly due to her ice powers. And hey, you know what? That makes sense. I can see it. She got so many votes that we scrolled for 10 minutes trying to count up how many she had, and it crashed YouTube's backend before we were able to count them all up. In the end, she tallied up 5,030 votes. Wild! As for second place, it was a surprisingly tight race between Moana and Rapunzel, but Moana just squeaked out a victory. A lot of votes were also put in before people had a chance to see Moana 2, and I wonder if that would have impacted things. Either way, this was a super fun experiment, and I definitely think we should do this Disney Princess Battle Royale theory someday. After all, I wonder how the likes of Mulan, or Merida, or Raya would do. Or if someone like Snow White or Cinderella could eke out a win. I mean, probably not on that one.
Take it up to death battle.
Anyway, thank you again for your help on this, and with all that said, let's jump back into the Disney theory. So last time we stopped off with The Jungle Book in the 1890s, but there's so much more to go. For instance, it's here where we come to another pivotal moment in the Disneyverse, just from the sheer amount of important elements that all happened in one place: Pinocchio, which takes place in Italy. We can also pin this one down to the 1890s thanks to the Ferris wheel we see in the amusement park. And, thankfully, this lines up with a lot of other evidence we see from the Disney canon. For instance, we can see one of Geppetto's earlier puppets in Corona during the events of Tangled about 50 years before, which checks out with just how old Geppetto would be at this point. But an even more significant connection might be to a movie you're not expecting: The Emperor's New Groove. Think about it. The Pleasure Island operation we see in Pinocchio is built on potions that transform boys into donkeys. Sound familiar? Pinocchio even takes place when Peru and Italy expanded their trade relationship in the real world. And we know that a number of the donkeys get shipped to salt.
Hey, sweetie, what you looking at me for?
Peru is home to one of the longest-running salt mines on the planet, which uses donkeys to this very day. So, you heard it here. The potion that transforms the kids in Pinocchio is the same one from The Emperor's New Groove.
Oh no, almost done.
That one took a lot to find a date, but thankfully our next entry
toes still purple from last night?
Rounding out the 1800s, we have The Great Mouse Detective, set in London during 1897, which we know thanks to a date on a handy newspaper. This movie is also the closest we're ever going to get to a Disney animated Sherlock Holmes, which makes me sad. I'd love to see that personally. But there's no need to dwell on that, just like there's no need to dwell on Make Mine Music, a collection of animated shorts, most of which are set in America. This bad boy's not even on Disney Plus, but it's part of the Disney canon, so we gotta count it. Most of the shorts are dotted across the first half of the 1900s, and they don't really leave much of an impact, so yeah, moving on. Just like The Great Mouse Detective, the next movie in the timeline also prominently features the Big Ben Clock Tower. I'm of course talking about Peter Pan, set in 1904 as confirmed in the film's pre-release promotional material.
Here, the city of London, back in 1904.
This film also once again goes hard on the magic of wishes and belief in fairies. There's a reason it's a Disney classic. A movie that didn't leave much of an impact though, The Wind in the Willows from The Adventures of Ichabod and Mr. Toad. This story was about some talking toads that takes place basically at the same time as Peter Pan in the English countryside, just a year later in 1905, which we know thanks to a dated invoice. And just like The Great Mouse Detective, it's another case of a sentient human-animal creature. Just thought I'd point that out, it will become relevant later. Heading across the pond, we actually have to make a pit stop in San Francisco. Here, a scientist named Lenore Shimamoto was experimenting with some sort of new power source. But her invention inadvertently amplified the great 1906 San Francisco earthquake enough that it became known as just the Great Catastrophe. Thankfully, the city was rebuilt with the help of Japanese immigrants, whose influence on the city had it redubbed as San Fransokyo. But here's the thing. power source that Shimamoto was creating? It was a star.
It created a star.
A star? Yeah, she was trying to harness the same star magic that set the Disneyverse on this wildly different path. The same stuff I assume the Atlanteans got their hands on and blew up like the whole world. Just goes to show how powerful this stuff is and how it continued to alter the Disneyverse even this far along the timeline. Heading over to New Orleans, we have Lady and the Tramp, which mostly takes place
so
in
emotional.
1908 based on a calendar marking a baby's delivery date.
Whoa,
April
hey,
of 1908 was the only month around this time that had April 1st on Wednesday. And before we take a break from our own movies, we have to head from the French Quarter to France itself. We have the Aristocats, set in Paris in the year 1910. Again, you have to love it when they make it easy with the
Alright, I think I'm gonna call it a night. This one needs some attention.
That was not as easy though. Well, we're gonna put Tarzan in Africa, also in the year 1910. Why would this one be hard? Well, first off, there's a popular theory floating around online that Tarzan's parents are actually King Agnar and Queen Iduna from Frozen. One of Frozen's co-directors actually has this headcanon themselves. But that doesn't really line up with the other things we know about these movies. For instance, it's said that the parents in Frozen were sailing to attend a wet...
Oh, wrong button. Yeah, that's it. No, that's... Alright. Alright, let's see, Riley. Go to bed. Alright, anyway, that's it for tonight. Hopefully I finish these guys up tomorrow. All the little faces. Yep, alright. Bye, guys.